tell us a little bit about your European experience up until 26 then, and maybe how like you just kept driving, you know, because again, like you said you were interested in some things, but maybe it didn't like culminate into you actually making the move and saying, hey, I'm actually going to do this in the Anglosphere or wherever, you know?
Right. Well, the basic thing is if you explore several European cities, right? You go maybe to Paris, you go to Amsterdam, you go to Berlin. They each have a lot to recommend them. Vienna also. Sure. They might have excellent universities. They might have great research libraries. They might have like something of a good sort of old world cafe culture where you can still say, just talk up a stranger about politics or about philosophy or whatever. You know, you talk to someone reading a book in a cafe there, if it's a physical book, is almost an invitation to go speak to the person. Wow. So you have nice remnants like that, but so much of my life has always been optimized to like be around the smartest people I can find. I usually phrase it that, you know, smart people are the best nootropic. There's no substance or training program. They'll do as much for you as speaking to like the most brilliant people you can find. And that's, you know, why I go out of my way to try to meet them, try to reach out with them, either professionally or just out of intellectual curiosity, right? Having, you know, say a good conversation with David Deutsch or Stephen Wolfram, easily worth weeks of study, I think.
Easily. So David Deutsch, again, for our viewers, more like a futurist, if you will, beginning of infinity. Loved that book. It was incredible. And then who's the? Sorry, I just forgot who you mentioned the second one.
Stephen Wolfram.
Stephen Wolfram, the guy who programming language and knew physics now.
Exactly. Yeah, he proposed a new paradigm of physics.
Yeah,
right?
Pretty intense. I was listening to him, I think, on the Sean Carroll podcast, and they were going through it. And Sean Carroll's about the most mainstream scientist that kind of takes these crazy abstract ideas and gets them into my puny brain.
Right.
So let's just talk about maybe some differences in living abroad versus the United States, and maybe just kind of set the tone for that. I know you talked about a little bit in intelligence, and maybe San Francisco or Los Angeles, even maybe New York has been known for that. But then what are maybe some of those places other than Paris or something? Have you found them in smaller places? Have you found them in bigger, or is there a big difference, or is it just cultural between most of them?
I think it's definitely the case that if you want the most ambitious, intelligent people, they will tend to be very much attracted to the prospects of some great economic achievement, right?
Okay.
So it's not that a place that's very prosperous will necessarily have a good intellectual culture, but the people who are high in ambition, high in intelligence will often end up congregating there. Much later in the development of a city, you'll also tend to see sort of patronage networks arise. You know, I have this like a little bit of a contrarian view that you can't use bureaucracies to legislate culture. If it was, Europe would be much more innovative in its culture rather than being at this point, unfortunately, a continent of museum cities, right? Museum city, like by which I mean Rome, right? You don't go to Rome for what's happening there today. You go there for what happened there 2,000 years ago, and you go see the ruins. Exactly. Yes. Or maybe the papacy. Let's say the papacy.
Yeah,
so
you
go visit not the Rome of Italy, you visit the Rome of the Caesars and the Rome of the popes. Those are the Romes you visit.
Right.
And I feel Europe more and more has these sort of museum cities, which are good custodians of a cultural legacy, but haven't created a new one. In America, a great example of great wealth and commercial success being translated with a delay into culture would be New York City. I think New York City, if you look at the origin of all of these big cultural institutions that are based there, they're just based on various industrial fortunes that were donated by people who were feeling sort of inadequate compared to Paris and London. You know, back in 1900, there were a lot of complaints written. Why is the art world less developed in the US than in Europe, etc. And a lot of things like, you know, I think the National Gallery in DC are from that era. Right.
Or the Met or something like that.
Exactly,
in that kind of area.
exactly.
Or like Rockefellers donating a bunch of money. It's okay. I can see
that.
Yeah. So when we talk about like that specifically, we just talked a little bit about the Anglosphere, I guess. How much experience, or is it something in the future, are you at all interested in, or what are maybe some of the centers in the Chinese or like kind of area? Is it Singapore? Is it, you know, maybe smaller cities in China that are innovating? What do you see on that, or do you have an experience in that kind of world, maybe from the digital sphere, or have you traveled there, etc.?
I would say that, you know, Singapore itself feels to me like a city that strove to achieve global preeminence, but I think kind of fell short. I think the agglomeration effects of Shenzhen are very likely to drive that as the intellectual and cultural city.
Gotcha.
But the disclaimer is, of course, I haven't been to Shenzhen. There was a planned trip to China that got canceled due to, well, you can guess it, COVID, right? So many of our travel plans were destroyed by COVID. So I still hope to go there. Though who knows, with worsening relations, we might have a world that's much less open to travel than what we've been used to.
Yes, that's very true, and not just even in the Anglosphere in terms of Britons trying to go through to the European world, et cetera, with Brexit, and then not just with COVID.